Hello, if you can hear my voice, my dear, I think I've succeeded in encouraging you to learn more about international law. And if that's the case, I can imagine two possibilities. First, this is your first time discovering IntlLaw Academy and you've just started watching one of our videos. Or second, you've seen my previous video and I managed to encourage you to come back, revisit, and spend more time with the Academy. And honestly, my dear, that makes me really proud of myself. But for you, dear, who's hearing my voice for the very first time and watching our Academy's videos, look up to the top right corner of the screen. Right there, my dear. If you want to know more about who I am and what I talk about, you can watch the first few minutes of that video, get to know me better, and if you like, join us on this journey. My name is Banu, and I'm happy and honoured to be here today, representing the IntlLaw Academy with our second educational video just for you. All right, so my dear, what do you think we're going to talk about in this video? Today, we'll chat a bit about the history of international law. We want to understand the amazing journey our field has gone through to become a source of pride today. If you want, my dear, you can pause this video, make yourself a warm drink, and come back so we can talk even more. The rich and eventful history of international law, my dear, should be looked at in several time periods. Ancient times, the Middle Ages to the modern era, from the Congress of Vienna to the Hague Peace Conferences, from the Hague Peace to the end of World War II, and finally, from the founding of the United Nations until today. And in today's video, we will focus on a time-travelling journey from ancient times to the advent of Hague Peace Conferences. Well, let's start by ancient times, or shall I say, from ancient roots to lasting legacy. My dear friends, come closer and listen well. Let me take you far back, beyond the tales of kings and empires we often hear, into the very cradle of civilization itself, Mesopotamia. Imagine the dusty lands around 2100 BCE, where the world's oldest surviving law code, the Code of Ur-Nammu, came to life. This was long before the famous Hammurabi, and it was a simple yet profound idea: justice. Fairness was the king's duty, and violence was not to be taken lightly. Even earlier, around 2450 BCE, two city-states, Lagash and Umma, fought over a small patch of land called Gu-Edin. But instead of endless bloodshed, these ancient neighbours hammered out a treaty carved forever into the stele of the vultures. Leaders agreed on borders and rules for battle. And who was the wise mediator? None other than Mesilim of Kish, a king who acted as a divine judge. A very early example of international mediation, don't you see? And there were more laws too. The laws of Eshnunna, covering everything from trade to personal behaviour, laying important stones on the path toward Babylonian justice. Now, fast forward a bit to the powerful Hittites and Egyptians. Around 1259 BCE, their great leaders, Ramesses II and Hattusili III, did something extraordinary. They signed what we now call the world's first recorded peace treaty. This wasn't just a polite promise. It was a pact to end war, to defend each other, and even to extradite criminals like an ancient Interpol. Written in both their languages and blessed by gods, this treaty showed how diplomacy and law walked hand in hand. The Hittites were also surprisingly kind for their time. Their laws allowed slaves to marry, own property, and buy their freedom. What about the Assyrian Empire? Around 1450 BCE, they introduced the Middle Assyrian laws, detailed rules for civil and military life. These laws helped spread the idea that law should be consistent, a seed for the norms that guide nations today. Then there was the mighty Achaemenid Empire, stretching from India to Greece. How did Cyrus the Great hold it all together? With tolerance. He let conquered peoples keep their religions and customs, managed by local governors called satraps. The famous Cyrus Cylinder? Think of it as one of history's first human rights charters, proclaiming freedom of worship and the right for displaced peoples to return home. What a remarkable man. In ancient Greece, law met philosophy. The Gortyn Code in Crete made laws public about property and marriage, so everyone knew the rules. The Amphictyonic League acted like an ancient NATO, protecting sacred places and settling disputes peacefully. And the Stoics brought us the idea of logos, a universal, rational law for all people, planting the seeds of natural law and universal rights. And ancient Rome, the great architects of international law, their feudal priests ensured that war and peace followed divine rules and respected treaties. They created the jus gentium, the law of nations, a legal framework to treat foreigners fairly. The 12 Tables, Rome's first public laws, shaped Western legal traditions forever. Don't forget ancient India, where Dharma and the Dharma Shastra guided rulers with a moral compass, teaching that righteousness was at the heart of both domestic and international law. And ancient China, where Confucianism made diplomacy a moral duty, maintaining harmony, not just politics. So, from Sumerian laws etched in stone to Greek philosophy, Roman legal wisdom, and Eastern moral governance, the roots of international law run deep, my dear. What lessons do they teach us? Justice, tolerance, cooperation, and respect, values still guiding us today. Remember, international law didn't begin in Geneva. It began in the hearts and hands of ancient civilizations long ago. Now, our tale moves into the vibrant world of the medieval ages through the Renaissance and early modern period, a time when international law truly began to take shape, shaped by faith, power, and philosophy. Imagine a world where two mighty forces ruled side by side, the earthly power of kings and the sacred authority of the church. This was the famous doctrine of the two swords, a balance between political rule and divine guidance. The church was not just a spiritual light, but also a lawmaker, seeking to tame the chaos of war. It introduced the peace of God and the truce of God, movements meant to protect the innocent and declare sacred times when fighting must stop. Far to the south and east, the rise of Islam brought fresh and profound ideas to the law of nations. Islamic scholars developed detailed rules on warfare, diplomacy, and respecting those of different faiths. The dhimmi system gave protected status to non-Muslims, letting them live in peace and worship freely if they paid a modest tax. And then came the Crusades. Times of conflict, yes, but also times of cultural and legal exchange. Europeans encountered the rich legal traditions of the Islamic world, borrowing and learning, forever changing European thought and law. Back in Europe, momentous legal milestones were unfolding. The Magna Carta of 1215 boldly declared that even kings must obey the law, a revolutionary step toward justice and equality. Earlier, the Assize of Clarendon introduced jury trials, giving common people a voice in their fate. On the seas, the Rolls of Oleron created rules for sailors and merchants, planting seeds for maritime law. The Fourth Lateran Council worked to reform the Church and set standards for conducting war, blending sacred and secular law. Then the Renaissance bloomed, a rebirth of ideas and learning. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 ended a devastating war and established the powerful principle of state sovereignty, each nation its own master, free from outside interference. Around this time, a brilliant mind named Hugo Grotius wrote De Jure Belli e Pacis, often called the foundation of modern international law. Philosophers like Francisco de Vitoria and Alberico Gentili wove moral philosophy into legal principles, shaping the rules nations would one day all respect. As we approach the 17th and 18th centuries, the world's nations began to see themselves as equals, sovereign states negotiating treaties, forming alliances, and codifying customs into clear laws. Enlightenment ideas of human rights, democracy, and reason breathed new life into international law, making it richer and more humane. And so, my dear friends, from the dance of swords and sacred councils to enlightened treaties and thinkers, the story of international law is one of growth, struggle, and hope. A tale that laid the foundation for the world order we know today, just before the Great Congress of Vienna in 1815, where the world reshaped itself after the fall of Napoleon. Now we embark on a new chapter of our journey, the dawn of modern international law. This story begins just after the mighty Napoleon was defeated in the grand halls of the Congress of Vienna in 1815. Imagine a Europe scarred by endless wars, yearning for peace, where the great powers came together to redraw the map and weave a fragile new order. From the ashes of chaos rose Austria, Prussia, Russia, and Great Britain, the four great architects of this new peace. They formed what came to be called the Concert of Europe, a loose but earnest attempt to keep peace by talking rather than fighting. Their goal was simple yet profound: prevent another great war by balancing power and acting together. But this was no perfect organisation. These powers created what was known as the European Director, a kind of early international club to manage continental affairs. They met often, for in the Paris Convention, Article 6 was carved in stone, declaring that these powers must gather regularly to consult on threats to peace, to settle disputes, and to guard the fragile order they built. Now, listen to this twist. France, once defeated and cast out, returned to this circle in 1818 by the Aix-la-Chapelle Protocol. France became the fifth great power, balancing the scales anew. Together, these five, Austria, Prussia, Russia, Great Britain and France, vowed to maintain peace in Europe. They also agreed on respecting different faiths, avoiding the religious wars that had plagued the continent for centuries. But their reach stretched far beyond Europe's borders. Their influence spilled into Asia, where China faced unequal treaties and pressures that chipped away at its sovereignty. Their ships and flags sailed into Africa, where colonial ambitions sparked the scramble for Africa, reshaping the world map and exporting European diplomacy, often with domination. Yet, the concert began to falter. The winds of revolution blew through Europe in 1830 and again in 1848, shaking monarchies and stirring nationalism. The principle of sovereign states, the right of nations to govern themselves, grew stronger, making the old balance harder to maintain. Across the Atlantic, the young United States declared with the Monroe Doctrine in 1823 that the Americas were off-limits to European colonization, a bold assertion of regional sovereignty that echoed through the world. As the 19th century marched on, the world sensed the need for clearer rules to govern war and peace. The Crimean War's end in 1856 brought the Treaty of Paris, which banned the use of naval mines and limited cruel weapons, early steps toward humanitarian law. Meanwhile, great powers gathered not only to make peace, but to manage crises, from the decline of the Ottoman Empire, known as the Eastern Question, to colonial rivalries. Arbitration became a favoured tool to settle disputes without bloodshed. The Alabama Claims Arbitration between the US and Britain in 1872 set a shining example, proving that words and law could triumph where swords had failed. New technologies like the telegraph and railways knitted the world closer, speeding communication and diplomacy. But the spirit of nationalism and revolution kept testing the old order, demanding self-determination and challenging royal authority. By the late 19th century, the need for formal international laws was clear. So in 1899, the First Hague Conference convened, a gathering of nations aiming to tame the horrors of war, promote disarmament, and create rules for arbitration and conduct in battle. This was no longer just a European affair, it was a step toward a truly global legal order. From the ashes of Napoleon's wars to the hopes of peace at The Hague, this era shaped the international law we live by today, a tale of balance, diplomacy, struggle, and the relentless human quest for order among nations. And so, my dear friends, remember this. The story of modern international law is a story of human endeavour, of powers seeking peace, of nations learning to talk rather than fight, and of the slow, steady march toward justice on the world stage. Well, my darlings, I think that's all for today. I do hope I haven't kept you too long or tired your mind, for I have truly enjoyed sharing these stories with you. It has been a pleasure, truly. I hope you found my tale of the fascinating history of international law as enchanting as I did telling it. Keep your mind sharp and curious, and perhaps you'll want to hear another story from me. Until then, take care of your beloved self, and I look forward to seeing you again.